Assalamualaikum and good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Captains of Industry Forum, Growing a Media Empire, which is being held in partnership with Young Corporate Malaysians. I'm Naylee Izzati, and I will be your moderator for today. Now, for those who are new to Cemerlang is a launchpad for high achievers that focuses on higher education pathway and career growth. Our co-organizer, Young Corporate Malaysians, or YCM, seeks to build an extensive network of young professionals through both social and formal events and provide opportunities for them to gain insights from various corporate leaders. Now, if you're new to Cemerlang, again, you do subscribe to our Telegram channel at t.me/cemerlang.org, or you can simply scan the QR code that's displayed right here for more insights like this. Now, I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to all of you joining us live on Zoom and on YouTube today. I hope everyone is healthy and staying safe at home. I'm extremely excited as I am joined today with two panelists who are both playing a leading role in the media industry. Allow me to introduce them in turn, starting with Rafiq Razali. Rafiq, 36 years old, is a graduate in actuarial science from Pennsylvania State University. He had a career in information technology with Maxis Berhad, where he held various responsibilities in the international data wholesale and the corporate strategy divisions. He was part of the team which formed Groupon Malaysia in 2011 and was promoted as Groupon's country general manager for Malaysia in 2013. In 2015, Rafiq and a group of investors established KFit, now known as Fave, a Malaysian startup company. Currently, Rafiq is the Group Executive Director of Media Prima Berhad and aims to further consolidate Media Prima's position as the largest integrated media group in Malaysia to fulfill the ever-changing needs of its customers. Next, Azeem, who is 30 years old, is a graduate in accounting and finance from the London School of Economics. He co-founded a media analytics and open source intelligence company as a student in London that served top government officials, ministries, and the armed forces. He was with UEM Group and UEM Sunrise Berhad for 8 years and was the special officer to the managing director with oversight on business development, finance, and strategic planning. Currently, Azeem is the managing director and CEO of Free Malaysia Today, the bilingual news agency with the largest reader base in the country. Known to be an independent media, FMT strives to provide intelligent and balanced content to its audience. Good morning, Rafiq and Azeem.
Good morning. Thanks for having us.
Hello, hello.
Right, thank you for joining us today. We're very excited for the fruitful conversation that we're about to have. Now, Rafiq, Media Prima is a media empire in its own right. It houses the country's iconic media brands such as TV3, Berita Harian, NST, Harian Metro, Big Tree, Tonton, and you also acquired Rev Media, which owns big online portals that elevates your game in the digital media world. Clearly, the might of Media Prima will have a significant bearing on the future of media. Now, how would you, as the leader of this massive media corporation, shape the industry's future?
Thanks. That's an interesting question to start. But before I start, I just want to congratulate Dato' Azul Hasni Awang for securing a silver medal in the cycling Kirin event, which just ended, I think, 20 seconds ago. So, second medal for Malaysia this Olympics. Very proud of him. I think, hope, continue delivering for Malaysia in the future. So, on your question, I think I'll start by, giving a bird's eye overview of what the media industry actually is in Malaysia. I think when you talk about the media industry, people tend to think about local media players like Media Prima, Astro, The Star, FMT, and whatnot. But I think the majority of the players in Malaysia are increasingly international. Facebook and Google are dominant parties in the media industry, and I think over the past couple of years or so, you see the entrance of new social media platforms like TikTok, who's gaining a lot of ground, and also what we call OTT platforms or digital streaming platforms like Netflix, iQIYI, Disney Plus, and whatnot. I think this means that the industry as a whole is very exciting. It has tons of players, and it will be increasingly more competitive, especially to local players like us to continue competing in the future. So I think right now, for me, there's basically a few things or a few trends that we're looking into that might impact the industry in the next couple of years or so. And I think there are many things that will happen, but to me, there are three things that that will be a bit more immediate and will definitely lead towards a bigger impact to the industry. Firstly, is content distribution will increasingly become more direct. What I mean by this is that prior to this, if you want to watch certain content, you tend to watch it or consume the content via intermediary, like a TV channel, right? So we like TV3 would acquire content from Hollywood studio, and then we'll have it available to the consumers in Malaysia. But I think with the launch of more digital streaming platforms, you will see content creators or people who create the content and own the rights to the content will increasingly go direct to consumers, which would eventually eliminate certain middlemen or intermediaries in the future. The second big trend that we see is a lot more larger investments coming into content. If you notice, Netflix as a whole, the annual content budget is about $12 billion US. That's like a GDP of a country, right? So it's massive, and I think these are the kind of a competition that will come to play moving forward, where you have large media houses investing tons of money to content to create or to continue the engagement with the audiences. And lastly, you also see a lot more fragmentation in content because content generally has become very global due to digitization. What will happen is that it will give rise to niche content or certain types of content that might not have a massive audience before, but because right now the audiences are global, it becomes large enough for certain types of content to create very, very interesting segments on their own. So I think with these three trends in mind, I think Media Prima as a whole, we're looking into certain ways to sort of like prepare ourselves to compete in this very interesting future in the industry. Firstly, when it comes to direct to consumer, while we have Tonton as a platform, our strategy right now is to also work with as many media platforms out there to distribute our content. If you subscribe to Netflix or Disney Plus, iQIYI and whatnot, you notice that a lot of our content are available there as well. We have tons of our drama and movies available on these kind of platforms, while also having it available on free platforms like YouTube and also on Tonton as well. So our motivations behind this is really to ensure that the content that we create gets the maximum reach possible. We want to be able to reach out to the maximum audience, and at the same time understand what kind of content works for what kind of platforms, and what kind of content do we invest in for the future. I think with the data that we're getting back, and this will assist us or help us to prepare in the eventuality where we might need to go more direct to our consumers. We will know a lot about what kind of content works for what kind of audiences and what kind of platforms. So we're now more into the discovery phase, but we believe that we'll be able to be more streamlined in this in the future. As for investments in content, I think for us, we are very, very, we know where we're strong at, and we'll continue investing in the areas where we're very strong at, which is in local content. Local content to us, we'll look at it into a few different segments. Firstly is in our local dramas and entertainment shows and whatnot, which we believe will continue having a good audience within Malaysia. But I think at the core, what we are very, very strong at, and this is also what my colleague Azeem's side is also very strong at, is in news and current affairs. Globally, news and current affairs is very local in nature. You need very local expertise to be able to be successful or to be able to create great content in this particular segment. And while a lot of us tend to consume entertainment kind of content, none of us can run away from news and current affairs because it's very relevant to us. It's something that changes daily, and it's something that excites a lot of people as well. And I think one of our biggest goals is to keep a lot of Malaysians continuously informed via the content that we create from this particular segment. And lastly, from a fragmentation perspective, I think our goal is we cannot operate in every single area. So while we're strong at certain areas which we'll continue investing in, we will partner with global partners when it comes to slightly more niche content that might have a bright future in the future. For example, when it comes to gaming and esports, we are actually the official partner of IGN, which is a large international global brand when it comes to gaming and esports. And we actually operate the brand in Malaysia, Singapore, Philippines, and Indonesia. So I think those are the kind of things that we are doing to ensure that we continuously are relevant in the future, especially with more fragmentation, more competition, and whatnot coming in. And I think as a final point to that, is something that I also want to raise, the importance of having local media players continuously being relevant in the long term, because in the end of the day, what does it mean to be Malaysian, right? Or what is a Malaysian culture? What's Malaysian customs? And a lot of things that we understand or know about being Malaysian actually comes from media. It's how you are raised at home, it's the friends that you make and the people you interact with, and also the kind of content you consume that sort of shapes what Malaysian culture or customs are. And I think it's important for us overall. And I'm not forcing people to consume local content, but I think it's important that local content is continuously supported, because that's actually our traditions and customs that will continue being taken care of in the future, instead of having everyone consume very international based content long term. I think we have a responsibility as a large media player in Malaysia to ensure that we continuously be sustainable, that we can continue delivering local content that's very relevant to Malaysians, that inculcates core Malaysian customs and traditions, to ensure that this continues in the long run, for our kids and our grandkids and whatnot. So yeah, I think that's my views on local media and the industry and where it's going in the future.
Interesting point, Rafiq. So although we're still in the discovery phase, as you mentioned earlier, it's really important to keep in mind, right, that the Malaysians need to be continuously informed about these local issues, and for local media companies to start partnering with global partners and keep investing. So it looks like Malaysian media needs change in order to survive. Azeem, FMT has 6 to 8 million unique visitors per month, making it the bilingual news brand with the largest number of readers. We see FMT practically everywhere now, especially during the current political and economic development. Stories and videos from FMT are like flooding social media and WhatsApp groups shared by Malaysians. Following what Rafiq had said, the media industry needs to change. So from your point of view, as someone leading a media organization with such immense influence, how should local media change?
Thank you, Naylee. It is a brilliant question and a pressing one, I would add. I feel that the future of media is where content is intelligent and balanced. Now, in this age of information, where information is abundant, people are more informed. They operate with more data, more information, and they are getting a lot more educated. So at this point, we have seen a big shift in demand for really intelligent and quality content. And we as media practitioners, we need to understand the concept of supply and demand of news. And because the society is becoming a lot more sophisticated, the demand for truthful, responsible, balanced stories is increasing more than ever before. And as what Rafiq pointed out, various international media companies, they are there. And I have to admit that we do see a shift in the viewing habit of our Malaysians towards the international content. Look at Al Jazeera from Qatar, BBC from England, Bloomberg from the US, TRT World from Turkey. They operate from their respective countries, but their stories, their content is relevant across the world and be consuming by everybody. And we in Malaysia, increasingly, I think when we ourselves watch BBC, Bloomberg, and some of our parents, when we go back home, they watch BBC, CNN, and even when we go through, in the offices, the TV turns on. It was international news. We go to hotels, they put up Bloomberg. So we need to be wary of what's happening now. And the thing is, I wouldn't see them as a threat, but we must be able to match the level of thinking of our very educated audience in Malaysia. We need to be able to have a sort of world-class way of producing content so that we fulfill the demand and expectation of the people. We are in a borderless world, and news organizations are able to operate from anywhere and make their content reach all of us in real time. And the content is of good quality, and if Malaysian media fails to do so, we will become irrelevant. So what about FMT? What is it that we are up for? Yes, we have a strong follower base in Malaysia. In fact, we are already at the top. So the question is, what is next for FMT? Clearly, at some point, we have to look beyond our borders and looking at exporting our DNA eventually. But before we do that, it is very important that we ourselves need to have world-class content and be able to match our audience base. Now, the FMT audience are highly educated. We were very surprised to see when we did a survey recently that about 91% of our audience have university and master's degrees. So that means the expectations that they have towards us is really high. So we have to live up to that, and it's not easy. And only by doing so would we be able to engage with them, captivate them, and be able to create community. And we are lucky that whenever we put up news, we always get intelligent arguments and debates within the comment section. We are very fortunate. And by us striving towards quality content, we've been able to rally a sizable number of audience over the years, and it's been growing exponentially. We've been quite big recently on videos, on video capsules, explainers that analyzes the issues dynamically and in depth to provide various perspectives to provide a holistic view of stories. And we also make sure that the appeal of our explainers, I encourage you to check it out on our YouTube. Our explainers, we make sure that the look and feel is of international standard. The motion graphics, the way we illustrate complex concepts to people. The narration, we make sure that we have an international kind of accent so that we have that international appeal. And our editorial continuously discuss and rigorously debate on the kind of angle that we need to put up. So make sure that we are balanced. If it appear to be heavy on one side, we make sure that we balance it out with the perspective on the other side. And that is continuous in FMT. Because at the end of the day, people want real news. People want something that's balanced. And we have to be a platform for everyone and mouthpiece of no one. So, and as a major news organization, we have a moral obligation to produce accurate reporting. In the context of shaping the future of media, I believe that the news media must provide news that captivate our society, that can elevate the quality of our conversation and debates. Only then we will be able to create a prosperous society that would be able to make well-informed choices in a democratic system. So that is what I believe we need to do to shape the future of media.
Right. So the key in improving and shaping the future of media, as Azeem had mentioned, was by providing accurate reporting and by being truthful and fulfilling the demand of the increasingly intelligent audience, right? We need to have a media brand that people can trust. So how do you, Rafiq, see our group of talents, say blending creativity and intelligence to uplift the standard of your content?
Sure. I think, first I want to clear some misconceptions on people who generally work in media, right? Media is definitely a creative industry, but, it's not on the lifeblood of media is not only creativity alone. Yes, creativity is important, but, it's becoming a lot more analytic, and it requires a lot more intelligence in being able to, run a media, create content and whatnot in the media company in the long term. Like for me, for example, I'm extremely left-brain. I'm, not the most creative person, alive, but yet, I'm in a media organization, and it's because I think media has, found the balance between, balancing creativity towards, using analytics, to basically prosper in the long term. So I think just to take a step back, I just want to explain basically, and for the benefit of all the audience here, so media broadly has, a lot of functions, but I think if you were to drill down into 4 different types of functions or roles of people in media, you can break it down to, I guess, the content teams, the journalists, producers, writers, the actors and the hosts in our programs, and also the editors, designers, and whatnot. With the sales teams that either sell advertising or do distribution or channel sales for the subscription, like Extra, for example. And also you have the content sales team, because content is also an asset which you can sell to other parties and whatnot. We also have the increasingly more important, which is the technology and data teams that create the sites, provide the analytics and data science, and also take care of the core system and tools that is the lifeblood of most media companies nowadays. And lastly, you have the support functions like HR and finance and whatnot. So if you look at even in the content teams and sales teams, where you think it's a lot more creativity and relationship and whatnot, but a lot of their daily jobs nowadays will require access to core analytics that allows them to make good decisions on what kind of content you want to produce, what kind of article do you want to write, what kind of things do you want to do in the long term. So for in the sense of what we provide for a lot of our content creators, there are systems that allow people to have access to what we call social listening, where you sort of have a temperature on what when it comes to certain topics or certain keywords in social media, what's people's general temperament towards those kind of things. You also have access to deeper understanding of audiences. We know ours a lot better than what we did before. We know what they like. We know what kind of ads respond to them. We also know what kind of content allows them to stick on our platforms in the longer term. And we also have instant feedback loops, right? So whenever something happens, if we mess up or if something is great, immediately we know whether what we've done is right, wrong, or should we improve, should we change, and whatnot. I think these are the kind of things that has, to me, changed the media industry quite a bit. That allows us to be very analytical in our approach towards creating content and towards the entire business as a whole. And I think overall, I mean, this might sound like a sales pitch for people to join the media industry, but the reality is I actually really enjoy my job here in media, right? So I'm not a media guy. I started with Maxis. I graduated in a degree in actuarial science. And I worked in Maxis doing some strategy stuff. Then I worked in startups like Groupon and Fave. And then for myself, joining Media Prima in 2016. It's been 5 years, but I find it extremely exciting. And I think one of the key things about working in media is how dynamic the industry is. It's been only 5 years, but so much has changed in the industry. Like when I started, there was no TikTok; it didn't exist. And now TikTok is like one of the main platforms of where content is being consumed by a lot of Malaysians. Fake news wasn't really a thing 5 years ago, right? It's a massive problem that we have to deal with at the current juncture. And also, streaming platforms, was just, I mean, Netflix didn't exist in Malaysia yet, they exist in America, but most of streaming happens on things like YouTube and whatnot. Right now, some of you might have 2 to 3 subscriptions, right, to Disney Plus and whatnot. So I think it's changed so much in 5 years. And I don't know what will happen in the next 5 years. I think it's going to be super interesting. I think that's the gift of the industry. It's never boring. There's a lot of things that you can work on, a lot of things that you can do, because things are constantly changing. And that's something that I feel is a great thing about the media industry as a whole.
Right. So Rafiq has said that in order to drive up our quality content, we have to practice social listening and have access to equal understanding of the audience, because as we know, the world is constantly evolving and constantly changing, right? And again, he has highlighted the importance of having a combination of being creative and intelligent at the same time. But that's in terms of content. Azeem, in your opinion, what should be the vision of the media industry in the business context?
Thanks, Naylee. I believe that the future of media, or at least Malaysian media, should become a lot more diversified in its business. Not just media, but they will go into other sectors. And in doing so, it will require people from different backgrounds, creative and intelligent people, group of people. Now, we are talking about building an empire here. So this forum is about building an empire and not merely a media company. So when we talk about building a media empire, we must maybe look at companies who have managed to achieve that level. And in the international scene, one good example is Disney, the Walt Disney Company. The Walt Disney Company is now worth 323 billion USD, and it's about 100 years old. It started off as a content company, entertainment company, but it is now in news to ABC, they are in sports to ESPN, they are in property to their theme park business, they are also in consumer products. So they are in various sectors and other sophisticated industry. And above all, the Disney brand has an emotional connection with a lot of people. Every generation, we come across Disney. So every time we talk about Disney, we would imagine the magical world of Disney, the castles and the princes and the princess and the frogs and the toads, So we will, the brand has now become immersive. So that is what a media company can actually be. Now, looking back at the Malaysian media industry, I feel that we are only at 1% of what we can really be. And a lot of us, I think Malaysia has a talent pool which I believe should be nurtured towards realizing this vision. And we need people who are creative and intelligent to do this. But you ask me, talking about Disney, does it sound far-fetched? I would say that no matter where we want to go, we have to start small. Now, in the local media scene, I think, of course, the next step to look at is probably regional, to think about regional play, to think about global later on. But how do we do that? We need to be able to export content. Our content must be of world-class standard for us to export it and consumed by people from other countries. That is how we would broaden the market size of the media industry, and thereby commanding a higher amount of revenue and scale up the entire business. Then only media companies in Malaysia will surpass the tens of billions of valuation. So so the first thing I would think we should do is we need to start small. The second thing is the usage of technology. Technology can accelerate growth of companies, and this is evident from the Netflix experience. Now, Netflix, it is now worth about 230 billion USD, which is not too far off from Disney. But what we need to be aware of, they have done it in a fraction amount of time. Disney is 100 years old, but Netflix got to where they are in 23 years only. And at the center of Netflix is technology. And we have seen that you can scale a company through technology. Facebook has done it. And even Grab, a close example, has done it. So it is possible to do it through technology. And the third thing which I feel we need to have is hunger. I think as Malaysian, we need to have that hunger to be international players. Thankfully, this morning, we got silver, which is a brilliant way to start this entire forum. So with that kind of hunger and desire to be world class, I'm very sure that we would be taking the steps in that direction. And looking at the news from the perspective of news agency. So I'm with a news agency. A news agency can actually attract eyeballs by the masses. So we can attract millions of eyeballs. And then in FMT at least, we've got other sections as well. We've got lifestyle, we've got automotive, we've got tech, business. So when we attract eyeballs to the national news, we then would also bring them to other kind of content. And these other contents are also monetizable. And to look at a larger scale of this model, we look at Rupert Murdoch, which is the iconic media mogul who was leading a News Corp, right, which is an international news agency. And then he then worked with 21st Century Fox, which is an entertainment business. So from news, you can actually grow your business in other areas as well. And the key thing here is we need to be able to diversify the media industry in Malaysia. And when in doing so, would require talent that are both creative and intelligent. We need computer scientists, we need data scientists, we need corporate finance people, accountants, lawyers to build, to structure the media empire. We also need, of course, above all, the creative talent need to be able to produce content that is of world standard so that we can export them. So together, the career in media in Malaysia would be a massive, will have plenty of opportunities for people from different backgrounds. So as Rafiq said, it's usually not the first choice for people who are more from the more scientific kind of qualification. But if we can have this kind of roadmap for the media industry for Malaysia, it will be damn exciting, I would say, right? So, but we must firstly set our minds to try to do it, take the first baby steps, start small. Second, we need to be able to use technology effectively to accelerate growth. And third, we must have the hunger of Malaysia Boleh must be there for us to drive this forward.
Thank you, Azeem. Azeem, you just mentioned about the need to produce world-class content by starting small first, being clever with technology to speed up the growth of companies, and having hunger, especially getting different people from different backgrounds who can help expand their business, right? And having said that, Rafiq, how do we attract the top talent to join the media industry to realize this vision?
So, interesting question. I think, I mean, if I could just start with, I have 3 work mantras as a whole, right? And I think, this relates very well towards this question. For me, my 3 work mantras, the first one would be control the controllables, which is, spend all your energy and time doing things that you can influence, not thinking about things that you cannot control. Second one is always start from the customer. They pay your bills, right? So in the end of the day, you should always make decisions that prioritizes your customer first. And the third one would be, awesome people make awesome companies. And I really, really believe in that, which is why, acquiring great talent has always been something that I am super passionate about. And it's something that I really put a lot of time and effort in to ensure that the organization has the required talent to continuously go further in the industry. So for me, from experience, right, I think what really attracts top talents to not only join an organization, but to also stay and contribute in the long term will be one, companies with a strong purpose. When they join, they know exactly what they're going for. They know exactly how their work impacts the audiences and people as a whole, and they understand what they're supposed to do, right? The second one is companies with great culture. By that I mean companies that have high levels of collaboration, that where people feel a sense of belonging, when you get to work with other great people. I think a great culture goes a long way towards and ensuring the energy levels in the organization is always high, and people are always happy to come to work and continuously do great stuff in the workplace. And lastly, I mean, you can't run away from this. Every organization has to provide competitive salaries and benefits and whatnot, right? But to me, you don't have to pay the most, right? You just have to be competitive in this area. But if you focus on your a strong purpose and a great culture, I think that's the magic formula to ensure that you can attract top talents to be part of our organization in the long run. So I think for us, really, what I also found out is that awesome people likes to work with other awesome people, right? So I think it's a cycle. So as long as you attract great people to come in and and continuously do things to upskill existing people, it will be sort of like a magnet to have more and more people, great people to be a part of our organization. And I think it was very different in my time in Group One and Faith, where we started from pretty much scratch and we could decide how we want to mold the people we want to hire, what kind of culture we want to build and whatnot. In Media Prima, when I joined, it's the first time I actually inherited a team, and I think it's interesting to be able to push for driving change within the organization. And I was very fortunate to have a very supportive team that that really bought into this whole idea and supported us in a long way, right? And I think for that, we did two core things that ensured that we can drive change within the organization, which is firstly over communication. You just have to reinforce your purpose and what we're doing and how it impacts people all the time, so people really understand what is the purpose of the organization and what we need to do. And secondly is to just drive more collaboration, right? From the way we design our office space, from the way we do our org structure and whatnot, it has to promote more collaboration, right? We don't like silos. So I think the more walls or the more barriers that we break, and the more we over communicate on the purpose of the organization, I think that helps when it comes to creating a strong purpose and a great culture. And of course, the business has to run. We need to be able to have revenue growth and whatnot, so that we can continue providing competitive salaries and benefits to our staff as well. So I think those are the kind of stuff that we have done, and that's what we will continue to be doing to ensure that we continuously attract great talent to be part of our organization.
Thank you, Rafiq. I think that perfectly describes the atmosphere that you go through every day, right, in the workplace. And being able to communicate with your team members and promoting collaborations are definitely key in this point. But what about the FMT experience? How do you attract top talents?
Thank you. Yeah, this is a very important question. Now, the challenge that we usually have is not just in attracting talent, but also to grow them. In attracting talent, we need to firstly set a high standard in the way we carry ourselves. We need to be able to set high standard in our output, our culture, so that we can project a brand that is desirable for people to associate themselves with. And once we've done that, we must be able to proactively source for talent. At least in FMT, I myself would actually interview a talent when I see one, especially when a good CV comes through, or when I meet people, I will actually interview this person, no matter how I would say junior the role will be. And sometimes the shareholder will come in as well. The top editors, the most senior of FMT editors will come in as well. So we continuously have to be able to do that in order to attract talent. So that's the first thing. The second thing is to grow talent. Once we bring them over, we need to be doing, I believe, three things. Number one, meritocracy. For God's sake, we have no choice but to embrace meritocracy, or we will fail. That's the first. The second is the managers must have the leadership in detecting talent and growing them. That's the second. The third is putting talent in the right places where they can maximize their potential. Now let's talk about meritocracy. I think we have come to a stage where we need to completely see beyond race, religion, creed, or even age. If we see a talent that can add value to the company, we must be able to take them in, grow them, and treat them fairly. Because at the end of the day, we can't afford to have the productive ones to compensate for the slackers, because company loses money by allowing this to happen. We have to be fair in the way we evaluate our staff, our talents, and the way they are being rewarded. And that is important because only by doing so, they would feel that this is a just organization, and a good organization which I can grow in as a talent, right? Then we will start seeing them being able to deliver above and beyond what they are expected to do. Secondly, leadership must be able to be sensitive about talent. What I mean by that is from the very top all the way to the lowest line managers, they must have a culture of identifying a talent and grooming that person. There cannot be a situation where this person, the line manager feels insecure that the subordinate would one day outgrow him or her. They must know that if to groom their student to be a lot better than them. Isn't that what teaching us is all about? Because if we can have that kind of mindset, the company will continuously grow. And we cannot really leave it to the KPI system all the time, because sometimes KPI system may get it wrong. Sometimes KPI is measured wrongly, or sometimes it is outdated. And usually KPI system evaluate an individual quantitatively. Human beings are not quantitative. We are very subjective. Subjective. Humans are subjective, so they need to be evaluated on a human centric approach as well, and dynamically be able to be nurtured continuously in an organization. So, and finally, third is to put them in the right places where we can maximize the potential. Sometimes, as to be in management, we would notice some of our staff are unable to perform in a particular role. But sometimes we must think that a fish cannot be expected to climb a tree, or Usain Bolt cannot be expected to win an Olympics gold medal in swimming. So we must make a conscious effort to see this talent needs to be placed in another room, which we may be able to shine. And in FMT, I've had the experience. For example, recently we hired a journalist who entered FMT as a writer, but unfortunately she was unable to. I would say the intensity of FMT's editorial was a bit too much to bear. And to the extent she resigned, she sent me a resignation letter. But then after a couple of days after thinking about her, I asked her, you know what, why don't you hold up on this resignation? Why don't you try sales? Because we find that she presents herself well, articulate, can communicate effectively. So we sent her to sales. And now she's doing really well. And I'm very proud of her. And she is, in fact, we have plans to grow her career into a more leadership kind of position. And I did not, and I'm really grateful that we did not allow her to go, right? Because this is clearly talent. And by doing these three things, we practice meritocracy. We have leadership that is sensitive towards talent, and putting them in the right places, we'll be able to project to the market that FMT is able to grow talent. And when that word goes out together with a brand that is reputable, top talent will come.
I believe Azeem has made it really clear that in order to attract talent, we need to be able to nurture the talent. So this means by putting talent in the places where they can truly maximize their potential. I think it's time to open the discussion to the floor. So we have a few questions already, and the first one is for Rafiq. So you talked a lot about partnering up with global media companies and exporting content, but how can we actually export the content?
I think if you look at it in the different types of content formats that we have, right? I think when it comes to a bit more long form content, like our drama series, like movies that we have and whatnot, I think there's massive opportunity to really export at the moment, because the streaming platforms are hungry to have this kind of content available on their platforms as well. I think that's what we've been doing, and that's what you see a lot of other organizations doing in the long run. For example, what's the name of the show? The Spanish show, Money Heist, right? It's content in Spain, right? Maybe 5-10 years ago, it's unlikely that any of us would actually be able to, consume that content because we will not know about it. But because Netflix picked it up and they did the required dubbing, subtitling, and whatnot, and suddenly it became a global phenomenon, right? Not the more usual content that most people will watch, but it's something that a lot of people globally starts to enjoy. I think that's the benefit of having more and more of this kind of platforms available. If you create awesome quality content, it's great stuff that people want to consume. I think there are many opportunities available to actually have a more global audience, despite language, despite having to dub it or have subtitling or whatnot. I think this shows that the more you invest in great content, the more you have the ability to become a lot more global with how you distribute those kind of contents. And that's more on the long form content, the dramas, the feature films, and whatnot. And when it comes to actual written content, like articles that we write and whatnot, also with YouTube, with Facebook and whatnot, we have seen a lot of articles sometimes go global. I can give an example. One of our platforms called Says, I think about 2 years back, wrote an article whereby it's actually quite general, right? Basically stating that people with different blood types can attract mosquitoes differently. So, for example, people with all blood types are the most attractive to mosquitoes, right? It's a very general content. Malaysians obviously find it relevant because we have a lot of mosquitoes in Malaysia, but that particular content went viral globally, right? We had close to 8 million people reading the article alone. And I think those are the kind of things that can start to happen, in the industry, and that allows a lot of us to, gain a more global audience in the future. So this is just the beginning. I mean, some, evidence, but I think there's a lot more that we need to do to compete with the likes of, I guess the Koreans, right, who's done a great job exporting content at the moment. I think we've got a long way to go to compete at that kind of level. But the opportunity is there. I think we make the right investments and we do the right things. We'll definitely be able to, export more in the future.
Thank you, Rafiq. Now let's ask Azeem a question. We have one here in the Q&A. Online news portals such as The Star and Sinar Harian have turned to having paid subscribers instead of giving free content. So the first question is, how does FMT finance itself? Is it sustainable to receive revenue via advertisements? And when will FMT become a paid subscription service?
Thank you for the question. In fact, I find that this question is can be sort of related to Muhammad Haikal Azmi's question. So I'm going to sort of read out the summary of what Haikal asked us. So he claims that FMT to be independent, but the thing is, how do we commit to being independent and credible when we look at the corporate ownership? It may involve certain individuals, politicians, that would be perceived to be influencing us. And at the same time, the question about financing the news organization. Now, I would like to answer this by saying that in general, media company across the world, the corporate structures would somehow be related to certain individuals, in politics or in business, or people who you deem to have interest. Okay, that is really the kind of industry, what's happening in the industry at the moment. And in that situation, a media company must be able to have a strong segregation between the editorial and the business side. Okay, and in the more advanced nation, that line is quite clear. And in FMT, we practice that. In the corporate structure of FMT, there is a clear division between editorial and also the finance side of things. And by doing so, we sort of we have a wall in which we can, I would say, act independently all the time. We do not receive any phone calls from the top or anything to influence the way we do editorial. No, never. There's never been that way. In our legal agreements, arrangement, all in our corporate structure, that's always remained clear, right? So that's the first step. The second step towards ensuring the independence of news is the way we finance the organization. And now this ties into what Edward Gordo asked about how we finance ourselves. Now, FMP, we are quite lucky because we are lean, right? Our staff is, I would say, one of the, we have about 80 staff, which is actually lower than most news organizations in the country. And thereby we are able to manage our costs for now. And the revenue that we get, alhamdulillah, it's quite promising. The trajectory looks quite promising for us. And the fact that we are now financing ourselves in that way, we will be able to exercise independence. So we will not be fully reliant on the shareholders, right? And that's the second step. The third step is, at the end of the day, it is the audience that determines our future, right? If we fail to provide you objective, independent journalism, you will not read us, and we will lose you. And that will be very bad for business. That will be very bad for our future. And that's why we have to really safeguard our independence. And we will know if we've lost it, right? Because people will stop reading us, they will accuse us of being biased. And that's how we need to make sure that we live up to your expectation of us. We have a responsibility to you, and we will deliver that. And if we don't, you will leave us, and that will harm us in the end, right? So these are the 3 steps. In addressing your question. And the final part of that question was, will we embark on a subscription basis? At the moment, I can tell you, no, not really. We will remain free to air for the foreseeable future, but I'm not denying that at some point we may have premium content. Not all, but some content would be, I would say, would have more premium value to it, and we would consider charging it. For example, like Reuters, they have their analysis report. Business Insider has their Business Insider Intelligence. So they started to charge for a more in-depth content. But this is something which we are looking at. But I can say that at this moment we are quite okay because we managed to sort of control our costs pretty well.
Naylee, if you don't mind, can I chip in on this question? Because we also have tons of new sites that we operate, right? So I think there's always been a big question, right? How do we remain sustainable in the long term? If you understand the news industry prior to this, revenue streams are twofold. One's what we call circulation, where we used to sell newspapers. People used to pay 1 ringgit or 50 or whatever to sort of like purchase newspapers. And then at the same time, we have advertising income from the newspapers, right? So that's historically how big news organizations used to monetize. Circulation is heavily under pressure. It's probably dropped significantly since what it was maybe 5-6 years ago. And I think that part of the revenue stream is very challenging for us to sustain in the long run. And as circulation comes down, it impacts advertising dollars as well. That's the reality of the business. So of course, a subscription has always looked, or it's always been positioned as the silver bullet that will help news industry sustain in the long term, right? While we've seen evidence of that in, I would say predominantly American media like a Wall Street Journal and whatnot, and the New York Times, we've done a really good job, building up their paywalls and charging people to read the content. But I think we need to also look at news objectively in a sense where, is that really where we want news to go? And I think there's some evidence, some research within America as well, whereby because of the rise of paywalls, right, what's happening is that it's developing a tiered system for news, where quality journalism from Wall Street Journal and New York Times and whatnot is not accessible to the masses, right? And what happens is that it opens up a gap in terms of having more and more people being informed, because let's face it, not everybody would pay a subscription to read news. A lot of news is still available for free. And do we really want a situation where very well written content, a very objective content, all of that, should be parked behind a paywall, which means that only a selected percentage of the population gets to consume that kind of content, versus the rest, right? We might get access to, I don't know what kind of content. Or do we want all this brilliant intelligent content be available to keep as many Malaysians as possible informed in the long term? No, biasly, I prefer the latter. I really believe in a world where information shouldn't be limited to people who can pay for it, right? It has to be democratic. Everybody should get access to great news and this kind of content in cheapest way possible, which is at the moment free. But however, this will be a question that will always be lingering because advertising revenues will always be under pressure, especially as the likes of Google and Facebook clawing their way, getting more market share in advertising markets, not only in Malaysia but also globally. So also another point for me is, and what I really believe is that subscription can only work in Malaysia if every credible news portal also creates a subscription model. As long as you have holdouts, some portals not putting up a paywall, I think it's very difficult for you to charge people to read news when they can get news from the other side for free. So I think that's the current challenge that we see in the market at the moment.
Thank you, Azeem and Rafiq. I hope that answers the question for Edward and Haikal, sorry. We have someone in the audience raising their hands. Johan, Hi, yeah, can hear you.
Yeah, I thought you're not gonna.
No, would you like to answer ask your question live?
Okay. Anyway, I've got two questions.
All right.
Number one for Rafiq and number two for Azeem. I'll start with Rafiq first. First of all, I like Rafiq's frequent use of the term awesome, because you're right, awesome people creates awesome content. All right, and number two, the fact that you guys are still in your 30s, that's fantastic. That shows that our leadership in this country is beginning to trust the younger generation, just like the ministers of Finland or Norway, I can't remember, beautiful girls in the range of 30s. Anyway, the question to Rafiq would be relating to your mentioning of Facebook and Google YouTube, right? So if I'm not mistaken, in 2019, the growth for digital revenue was positive. However, if you strip out Facebook, Google, YouTube, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, it was negative, okay? So I think Malaysia is a small economy and something needs to be done in order for the local media industry to grow. So what has happened in I think Singapore, Australia, I'm not sure about other countries, but those are the two prominent ones that has taken some action against the likes of Facebook, Google, YouTube, and the more globalized media company. So what is your opinion in terms of Malaysia? What should the government do as an affirmative action in order to help grow the local media industry? And this is not something new because the Malaysian government has done something to Proton in the automotive industry. So, okay, so that's for Rafiq. Should I ask the question for Azeem first or later?
Azeem, would you prefer it now?
Yeah, you can ask now.
Okay. So question for Azeem. Number one is, before that, I like your hoodie. Actually, it's quite nice. If you can send me one, it would be really appreciated.
Yeah.
So you are a graduate in finance, London School of Economics, but now you got yourself entangled into journalism, and journalism is very closely related to politics, right? So I understand the FMT stand on this is apolitical, right? So you bash both sides, or you talk good things about both sides, whichever way you want to look at it. Now, I am a student from this university called RLUP, stands for Real Life University of Pragmatism. And so we've got some projects doing some content. And the content was talking about Lompat Party, okay? Lompat Party, and then that content got banned by authorities. I shall not mention which authority, if not they will catch me. So what is your opinion in terms of censorship, actually? Because FMT wants to go for an apolitical strategy, but then if you got anything that bashes the government and all that, they got authorities banning your content from their various arm of censorship. So that would be the question. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Johan. I think we can start off with Rafiq. Would you like to answer his question?
Sure. Thanks for the question, Johan. I like the word awesome. Glad you like it too. So, as for Google and Facebook, right? It's a global. I don't want to say problem, but it's a global challenge, right? They are dominating a lot of the advertising revenues in majority of countries globally. There's only a few countries that's been able to, compete back. For example, China. China's method is very simple. They just ban Google and Facebook. Very simple, right? I think that's one way if you want to compete, but we all know that it's kind of unlikely to happen globally. But there have been certain other models that have been introduced, over the past, a few years or so. And I think this is a very interesting question from Johan because this is a very real problem, right? If you have Google and Facebook continuously, pressuring traditional media companies right to a point of, I guess, extinction, then who's going to create local content long term? So I think local media companies need to be sustainable in the long term. Of course, we've done a lot of things to optimize our operations, but in the long term, we should be able to figure out a way to also compete against the likes of Googles and Facebooks of the world. So there's been one model that's done maybe 3 to 4 years back, which is, for the lack of a better word, I'll just call it a cartel model, right? Whereby local media players band together. They basically have all the inventories available in a very consolidated manner. And if you want to have access to credible inventories for advertising, you must deal with this cartel alone, right? And that has helped, and that's what's done actually in New Zealand, where they went from maybe 10 to 15% market share to 40% of the market share of digital advertising, which was a great achievement, in that respect. However, when you have historical competitors having to work together, generally it doesn't last very long. So I think what happened in New Zealand is 4 to 5 different media companies banded together to do this. After a few years, something happened, they didn't like each other or whatever, and it disbanded, right? And then it's back to normal now, where Google and Facebook has a lion's share of the market share. So I think that's one model that has worked, but maintaining that might be challenging because you're talking about historical competitors having to work together for a long term, which will be challenging. But there's a new model coming up, and I think this is an interesting model where governments are stepping in. I think they realize the importance of ensuring the sustainability of local media in the long term. They realize that it is a very different or unfair advantage that global players have, right? For example, Google and Facebook. I mean, just very blunt here. They don't really pay taxes because if you actually sign on for an advertising package from Google and Facebook, you're actually signing on for a package with the Irish or the island entity, right? Where they get where you're doing business with an international party, right? So Google Malaysia doesn't really pay taxes, right? Even though they make a lot of revenues on that. However, local media players, we pay taxes, we employ locals. Our employees pay taxes, and it helps the economy as a whole. So I think these are the kind of things that governments are starting to look into, and that's something that's why they're taking action. An example would be in Australia, the government has mandated Google and Facebook to strike deals with local media players to sort of have a licensing fee for the content that they publish on those platforms, right? So basically, they just told Google and Facebook, why don't you strike a deal by negotiating directly? Or if you don't do that, I will decide how much you pay the local players. And of course, nobody wants the government to decide these things because it should be business led. I think that's what happened in Australia. Google and Facebook has struck deals with 3 to 4 different major media players in Australia for sort of like a licensing deal where their content will be available on the Google and Facebook platforms, but there will be a more equitable revenue share or payment towards this publisher as a whole. And I think what will most likely happen in the next 3 to 4 or 5 years or so is that more and more countries will adopt a similar model to ensure that the local media has access to a more sustainable revenue stream in the long term. In France, something similar has happened as well. So you'll see this happening, becoming more prevalent globally as well.
Thank you, Rafiq. Moving on, should we have Azeem answer his second question?
Right. So Johan's question was, as a media company which actively reports national issues and politics, how do we view censorship? Okay, I would say that censorship in Malaysia is weakening. Okay, I'm not saying it's not there, but it's weakening. Now, censorship in Malaysia used to be quite strong in the 1980s, 1990s. But since Bakar took over in 2004, there was a relaxation of it. It was a bit more open. And then, but as you can imagine, that cost him the election. And when Najib took over, the initial parts of his years in office, the first 4 or 5 years, the media was able to, at least online media, was able to act quite independently, and that has helped. But when the 1MDB issue arose, we started to see increased censorship with the closure of the Edge and a lot of threats and lawsuits, and eventually it cost them the elections. And then PH took over. Now, I would say that during the PH time, the media was sort of in disarray. They were a bit disoriented because traditionally the mainstream media has been I would say aligned to the government of the day, but a bit disoriented. But I would say that there was a bit of some people in the government during PH time did work with us on certain things, right? I won't say it was completely independent. And then finally, during the PN government, we see that because of the fragmentation in the political system and the parliament and how strong the prime minister is, the censorship has weakened considerably. Now they are, but the good thing for them is that they now work with us. They invited us to explain things, and I would say that that is a good sign. Because if they work with us, they explain things properly to us, we will be able to tell their side of the story a lot more effectively. There's no need for censorship, and I believe that the government or politicians need to realize that censorship will only backfire on them because it's really obvious and evident from the past. Every time you try to censor, it backfires, backfires. And we have to appreciate that the audience or Malaysians are a lot more educated to see through deception. And they won't buy it if you try to misrepresent certain things or try to water down certain things. They won't buy it, right? We cannot insult their intelligence. We as media practitioners, the government cannot insult the intelligence of Malaysians, and seek to educate, engage with them in order to create a more vibrant media landscape in the future.
Thank you, Azeem. I hope that answers the question for Johan. Now, moving on, we have a question from Shafiq. So this is a question to Rafiq. With the immense volume of information and entertainment available at the hands of the consumer, how do you maintain your pulse on market trends? And how do you stand out from competitors, both locally and internationally? How do you re-demonstrate the value of your media brand to the mass market with rapid changes happening to the landscape? And what does that mean in terms of getting buy-in internally?
Right, interesting question. I think what we're deploying at the moment to sort of like ensure that our content remains relevant in the long term is that right now, over the past few years or so, we've invested a lot in our data infrastructure. This allows us to better understand, what we do on a day-to-day basis as well. And I think, a lot of our decision making when it comes to, what we do from a content perspective derives from data as well, right? Not necessarily just data alone. We need the creative side of things as well, but it's a marriage of both, right? I think that has allowed us to sort of like maintain a pulse of, what our audiences want to consume, and allowed us to continuously create the kind of content that's engaging for them, right? I think the numbers have showed we've been able to extend our engagement even further as we continuously invest or utilize the data that we have. And when it comes to buy-in, I think, I really believe success begets success. Nobody, in the right frame of mind would say, oh, I don't want to be successful, right? But a lot of people are resistant to change. So what we usually do is that, let's say we have a new data platform or a new tool that we have available for certain parts of our teams to utilize. Of course, it requires a change in how they do the day-to-day task, which they might be resistant to in the future. But I think you start small, but you start with very good success cases, right? And the more they start using certain features in the tools, the more they realize it helps them do their job better, the more they will get the buy-in, right? Because we're not forcing them to do something that is not good for them. It's good, but sometimes, it takes time to inculcate the change. And what we need to really ensure happens is to show them, how they can be even more successful as they continuously, enforce those kind of changes to their work as well. And that's what we do. We don't suddenly say, hey, tomorrow change, do everything in a different way, right? You have to start small, and that's how you get the buy-in, right? And it has to show proof that it makes their work better.
Thank you, Rafiq. Let's have a few more questions. So we have a question for Azeem. How much does a junior columnist fresh out of college can earn at FMT? And second question, how much can a senior columnist approximately earn per month at FMT?
Right, thank you for that question. Really, I would say point blank question, and I will give you a point blank answer. Junior columnists in FMT can make between 2,500 to about 5,000. And senior columnists, I would say the senior editors, right? They would make between 7,000 to up to about 15,000. I would say that this quite competitive in the media world. Yeah.
Thank you. Another question for Azeem. Does FMT sell research and insights to corporate companies and governments? Does it see itself evolving into a data analytics company like Cambridge Analytica, given that FMT has one of the largest number of web clicks? How is it currently leveraging on this data to create profit?
I love the question. First of all, whether we want to venture into research papers, I believe that it is an area we have to look at if we want to monetize and provide premium content. Yes, we are looking at it. That's the first. Back to the level of Cambridge Analytica, for the benefit of the audience, Cambridge Analytica is a body which sort of use data to target messaging to specific individuals to achieve a certain perception change. So they deploy methods such as psychographics. You know what is jargon, right? Psychographic that sort of can understand your character online, in a very deep way where you are, and you can sort of micro target your messaging, make it super relevant to a certain individual. To the extent of sometimes it can be exploitative as well. And it was quite controversial during the election, during the US election and the Malaysian election. There was an allegation that the government back then was using the services of Cambridge Analytica. So to answer your question shortly, no, we are not heading that direction. We are a media company. Our main core business is content. So we create content. How are we going to use data to monetize? Definitely, but our way of monetizing through data, actually I'm working very closely with Rafiq on this. Yes, we will try to gather data about our user base, and when they sort of register at some point with our platforms, we will be able to know a bit about their interests, right? So and those are all I would say with permission, because they would tell what their interests are, and thereby we will be able to tailor our content to fit their needs better. And when we achieve that level of optimization, it works well for advertisers, and thereby we'll be able to improve the return on investment of the money spent on our advertisement. So yes, we are going that direction, but not to the extent of Cambridge Analytica. I can guarantee you that. Don't worry.
Thank you, Azeem. I hope that answers the question for Haris. Now I'm going to move on to another question. I think this goes for both of you. What are the popular news stories that appeal to your audiences? And what do most Malaysians like to read about? Maybe we can start off with Rafiq.
Sure. I mean, we operate a large and very diversified, I guess, news establishment. But I can say that it really varies depending on the time. I would say consumption of news have increased significantly with what we've seen since the pandemic started. I think a lot more people want to be informed when it comes to matters regarding the pandemic and whatnot. So I think at the current juncture, any news with regards to COVID and its vaccines and whatnot tends to get quite a bit of interest. If you look at our current political, climate in Malaysia, politics always get interest, but it's even more so now because of the certain things that's been happening over the past few weeks or so. And I think political news, has taken a lot of center stage over the past couple of weeks or so. But another types of content that people tend to enjoy are, I guess, is really what we say mass relevance, right? Content with mass relevance. For example, blood types and mosquitoes, right? It's so random, but it's super relevant to all of us because all of us probably have been bitten by a mosquito before. So those are the kind of stuff that tends to work. We try across various different types of content categories. There's some guaranteed winners, which is things like politics, current affairs, and things like that. But when it comes to other forms of content, it's really a matter of what is super relevant to our audiences at the point of time. Which is why, as we run a very diversified news establishment, we have our core niches as well. Like, for example, esports is something that might not be relevant to a lot of people, but it is relevant to an increasingly large group of people, and that's why we have close to 1 million plus people reading articles across IGN and My Game On, which are 2 esports sites in Malaysia every single month. So it's tough to answer because there's no specific category, but it's a continuous effort to ensure that we deliver what kind of content people actually want to read in the long term.
Yeah, so as for me, for FMT, of course, number one is national issues, and when audience come to ask about when audience come to read us on national issues, we found out that they also have the character, kind of sophisticated character, which appreciate lifestyle content, and our lifestyle content has been doing tremendously well, and especially those that are related to human interests. So, for example, when we put out a story about a person an engineer who couldn't get a job because of the pandemic, who did not rest on his laurels, he rised up and started to sell maserati in brickfields, right? So he did not just wait for the government to help him. Just I got to do something. He started to sell those tea, and we covered him. And after that, I think a few media agencies covered him, and his sales sort of skyrocketed. And that kind of human interest stories that are inspiring tend to be very well read from among our readers.
Thank you, Azeem. Now we're moving on to the last question for this webinar. I think since Azeem, you are 30 and you're leading an influential media powerhouse, and Rafiq, at 36, you're already leading a public listed media conglomerate, right? And I think this begs the question, how did you get to where you are at such a young age? Maybe we can have Rafiq first.
Sure. If you want my honest answer, really, it's a lot of luck and serendipity. Really, it's I mean, I've been fortunate enough to be able to work in my career so far. Work for really, really interesting companies, right? As a whole, from Groupon to Fave and Media Prima. I think in Media Prima, it's really fortuitous because I think the board and the leadership of the organization eventually realized that digital is the way forward, and I think the best way to sort of address that is to have the guy who's doing digital in the company, I guess, lead the overall organization, right? So it's really if you ask me why did they pick me, I don't know. Sometimes I ask myself that question too, but I'm very thankful. I think a lot of it is a very fortuitous series of events that has led to this. But I'm thankful and I relish the opportunity, and it's something that I want to continue delivering in the long term as well.
Thank you, Rafiq. Azeem?
To build upon what Rafiq just said, it is luck. And I believe luck is when preparation meets opportunity. And I think for me at least, of course, I was blessed with the opportunity, but much of it was also a lot to do with preparation. And ever since I was in KYS, in my school, we've been trained to be, try to be an all-rounder, be able to do multiple things at the same time. So that kind of DNA sort of grew up with me, and all the way to university, I sort of started a startup there on analytics. And then after that, I went to work in UEM Sunrise and UEM. But what I felt that I was doing was that above and beyond what I was doing on a daily basis is that I always spend my extra time, my leisure time doing other things. And that sort of opened more doors and enriched me with new skills. And when I managed to do that, I become more lucky because when I meet more people, a lot more people sort of notice me. And when I work hard, they sort of give me opportunity. And in the context of FMT, that time, they were looking at growing the company to take it to the next level. So we were trying to do some fundraising. So I helped with the corporate finance side of things and business planning. And after pitching that to investors, they said, why don't you join, right? Why don't you run it? Why don't you make it happen? And the rest is history. So I was fortunate to be given the opportunity. I'm humble, and but I have to caution you, despite being here at a young age, I am continuously guided by people who are a lot senior. I have mentors in this company who continuously show me, to share with me his experience, their experience in running or leading a news organization. So I'm not doing it alone. The support system for a young, I would say MD must be there for us to try. We may have, being young, we may have the energy, we may have the hunger, but we would do well for ourselves to learn from the experience of the ones who are much older, more experienced than us, and we have that in FMT. But before I think I want to just answer Ahmad Fahmi's question. He asked, an unbiased and responsible media is what people are looking for. So whose jurisdiction is this in the company to ensure this? It is the responsibility of the editors, the editorial desk, and we do have, we proactively assess the level of balance that we assess the balance of news that we put out every single day, and through experience, and we hire really experienced editors. Okay, I may be young, but I'm doing the business side of things. But the chief editor, at least in FMT, they are the senior ones. They have been in Al Jazeera. They've been in the staff for 40 years. They set up TV3. So these guys, they know, they know they have this deep expertise in ensuring that whatever we put out remains fair, truthful, balanced, and credible.
Thank you so much for the answer, both Rafiq and Azeem. I would like to just squeeze in one last question because Isam Omar just managed to type in the chat. For people aged 25 and below and looking towards the future where they will be the future drivers of media consumption, how do you see media companies changing to thrive? Rafiq, would you like to answer this question?
Sure. Thanks, Dato' Izam, for the question. If you guys don't know, Dato' Izam is one of the biggest, media, I guess, celebrities in Malaysia. He used to be part of Media Prima, but is now, leading the charge for Disney Plus, in the region. So, happy to have a question from Dato' Izam. So, okay, as for the question, I think it's always something that we want to keep a close pulse towards. I think majority of our audiences in Media Prima are 25 and older, and I think it's interesting for us to start thinking about how do we sort of like cater towards people who are relatively young, and it's actually a large part of the population of Malaysia moving forward as well. For me, there needs to be two things that needs to happen, right? Firstly, as an organization, we have to be nimble and agile, and we have to be, very, very accepting to change, right? So what I mean by that is, it's a very dynamic industry. So when we see trends, when we see things are happening, we cannot be like an oil tanker where it takes a full day for it to make a turn, before it goes to somewhere else, right? We need to be able to make an immediate change to be able to capture or leverage off of the things that we find out about the change of media consumption patterns, what kind of content we want to consume, what kind of formats and whatnot, right? I think we have to be nimble enough and agile enough to be able to do that, and not say, hey, no, we've been doing things a certain way for so long. I mean, changing will take time. We don't really have much time, which is why I think as a whole, the organization has to be more agile. And the second part is that I think we're fortunate because a lot of things are not really based on hunches or guesswork anymore. We do have access to tons of data. And I think by accessing, or by leveraging of the data that we collect and we understand, we actually do know, what meaningful changes are happening with audiences, what they want to consume, and what kind of things that we need to do in the future, right? So again, you have the intelligence, but you also need to have the willpower to actually make changes or do things that will leverage off of the intelligence that you find out, right? So it's a function of both. It's a continuous process. Honestly, I don't know what we need to do now to be able to capture that younger audience base at the moment. But I am confident that as long as we have a strong data ecosystem and we have a very agile organization, we should be able to, compete in the future.
Thank you, Rafiq. Azeem, would you like to add anything to that?
I think this is really Rafiq's area. I think I reserve my comment.
All right. Thank you again, Dato, for the question. I would just like to say that I've learned so much from this talk, and I hope that the audience agrees with me that both of you are truly inspiring leaders. I would like to thank both of you again for being here today and taking your time on a Sunday to help impart knowledge to our audience. It's been certainly delightful. And a big thank you as well to Young Corporate Malaysians for being our partner for this forum. Now, before we end, I would like to urge everyone to subscribe to our Telegram channel at t.me/cemerlang.org, or you can scan the QR code that's displayed right here for more insights and forums like this. Again, thank you so much and see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Take care. Have a good Sunday. Bye.
Bye.